What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another video on the channel. Today, I want to walk you through the intraday analysis that I do on the futures contracts. And for the purposes of today's video, we're going to focus on the S&P 500 futures. Now, every morning as traders, we all come into the day before the market opens and we spot our levels of importance. We look at where is their potential support, where is their potential resistance. But as the market starts to trade, new levels are formed and new levels of significance have to be paid attention to. In today's video, I want to talk you through what I do on the intraday basis to be spotting the levels as they start to form. This is a very big part of my trading, and just today I took an SPX put off of a level that was formed intraday, something that I was watching before pre-market, but the intraday analysis that I did today confirmed my idea of playing this SPX put, and it was a very nice trade to the downside. So in today's video, I really want to focus in on that intraday analysis. I think this is a very big key of your trading, to be able to focus on what the market is giving you on the intraday basis and to be finding new levels of importance that you have to be paying attention to. So let's go ahead and do that today. Press that like button, subscribe to the channel. Let's go ahead and jump into it. On the screen, we are looking at the last week of price action, and we are looking at it on the 30-minute time frame. I like to use the 30-minute or 1-hour time frame because it sort of takes out any of that noise on intraday volatility. You start to really see some levels that start to form, and I like to be looking at what happened the last week. So last week, we got about 6 or 7 days of price action, and we're looking at the 30-minute chart. Now, every day that I come into the market, the first thing that I'm looking at is where was last week's highs and where was last week's lows. So for this example, last week's highs were up here around this 4,072 level. Now, sometimes what I'll do is I'll click into that line and I'll type last week highs, right? So I know that if I'm on an intraday time frame and this is coming into the last week highs, I know that it is there. It's around that 4073 level. So I have that sort of pointed out to make sure I know where was the market trading last week. The last week lows were down here around this 3003 level. So if I go into this, I can type out last week lows, and I know that if the market starts to trade down like it did today to the previous week lows, then I know there could be support in that level. So you can see just today we traded down into the last week lows, and we see that we started to hold some support. So I like to come into every single day looking at where was the last week highs and last week lows, and I like to put a little bit of a green box around that area just so I know that it is a zone. It is not just a single line. It is more of a zone. So that is where I'll start, right? So we have last week's highs and last week lows, and just looking at today's price action, we did trade back into those last week lows, and we had some bounces off that level. So I like to do this because if I'm trading to the downside, if I have put options and I'm not aware of where the last week lows were, then this could cause me to lose money. I need to make sure I know where the prior week lows were, so that I know if I'm in put options, if I'm playing downside, I need to know that, okay, I'm in a put, we're trading at the previous week lows. This could be where some support comes in. I have to make sure I am aware of that, because if I'm in the 1 minute or the 5 minute chart and I'm looking at the intraday analysis, let's say I'm just looking at the 1 minute chart here and I'm looking at what's happening just today, I need to know where these last week's lows are. I need to know that there could be reaction to this level. If I'm on the intraday, you might sort of get lost in the sauce. You might forget that that was the last week lows, and you need to make sure that's on your charts. So back to the 10-day, 30-minute, we can see that that is exactly where we came in today and where we started to find some support. Now, after I have those highs and lows started mapped out, I start to go smaller in this channel. So let's sort of shrink down this channel and find where our next levels of importance are. The next one that's very clear is around this 4,020 level. You guys can see right here. Now, why is this level important? Why do I want this on my screen? The first reason is because you had a previous support in this level right here. That is where we found support back on Monday of last week. You can see we dropped below that on Tuesday. We came back into it and we rejected it double top on Tuesday. Now, if we come into last week more, we can see Thursday into Friday, we came into that level again and we rejected it again. So just the fact that we have rejected and found support at that level so many times, I need to make sure I am aware of this level, and I am going to put a box around this level so I know that anytime that the market comes back into this level, I need to be paying attention to it. If we are trading below it, I need to look for rejections. If we are trading above it, I need to be looking at it as support. So we have last week's highs, we have last week's lows, and we have this very important level here on the ES that you guys can clearly see was tested multiple times. Now we come down to our next levels. We come down a little bit lower. Where was the next level that was important? You guys can see right here, this 3,980 level. You have a previous low here, you have a rejection here, and you have multiple rejections here on Thursday and Friday. So if that level is being touched multiple times and we're seeing reactions at those levels, there is my next level that I have to be watching. Right here in this general area around this 3980, 3970, I need to make sure that I'm aware that there has been previous support, rejections, and if I'm on my intraday analysis, I need to know that that is starting to come up to that level. Now, one more level that I want to point out here that came in very crucial today is the lows of this consolidation from this Friday of last week. You guys can see we had lows of this consolidation right here, Friday of last week around this 3960 level. If I draw my box there around 3960, you guys can see that we rejected this level perfectly this morning. Now, if you're in my pre-market live streams, if you are in my Discord, if you pay attention to the levels I provide, you know that we were talking about the 3960 as a potential rejection early morning today. This was a previous support level that we broke below, that we turned into a very clear rejection point. This level was everything today. This was the rejection level that caused the market to move to the downside, and this was the rejection level that ultimately caused weakness to creep in. You can see the previous lows here around 3960 that turned into a rejection. So I have these levels mapped out as I come into every single day. I have these levels on my chart with a little bit of a green box because if we start to trade into them, I need to know that these are levels of importance. If I go into the 1 minute chart and I'm getting sort of tunnel vision on an intraday basis, if I don't know where my levels are, if the stock market spikes higher, where am I trading, right? I can't get lost of where these levels are. Now, if I have my levels set out, if I have my green boxes, then I know, okay, if the market is trading up here, I know, hey, there's something at this level. There is a level of importance. I have charted this out previously. Let me go ahead and go back and check where this is. If I go back to the 10-day, 30-minute, I can look at this and say, hey, we just traded back into this previous rejection point, which was a previous support here. I need to be paying attention to this level. This could very well be where the market rejects. Now, this chart right here on the 30-minute is about as far as I will take this analysis. I will not start looking at very minute levels. I will not be putting lines all over the chart. This is about as much as I want to have on my screen. These are levels of major importance. These are levels that have been touched multiple times. I am not just putting random lines here on the longer term analysis on the 30-minute chart. I am only putting lines here that have been touched multiple times over the last week. We can see that every single line here has been tapped multiple times over the last week. This one up here, we had a rejection. This is last week's highs. This next level around 40.20 has been supported, rejected, and rejected. This next level here around 39.70 was a previous support that turned into a rejection that rejected multiple times on Friday of last week. This low right here was where we found support Friday of last week, and you can see today we rejected. And then the final line that we have is the prior week lows. That is a level that you have to have on your screen. So now that I have that 30-minute, that last week analysis on my screen, now I can jump into the intraday analysis. So if we go to the 5-day, 5-minute chart, which is likely where I like to do sort of my shorter term analysis, let's just go ahead and look at today's price action. So what I'm going to do for this is I'm going to go ahead and pop on the after hours trading session so we can get a good idea of where just today's price action was. So let's zoom in to just today's price action, and you guys can see how these lines were sort of respected. So the first thing that I came into today without knowing what happened today, if we ignore today's price action, the first thing I knew was that I had two lines above and I had my last week lows below. So if we come into the day, let's just go ahead and push this over and just look at the price action pre-market. If you look to the very right of your screen, this was what we were looking at in the pre-market today. We looked at this and said 39.60 above. That's our rejection. If we break through, possible rejections up at 39.70. if we do break down, possible support down at last week's lows around 39.03. So I know that these levels are here before the market opens. Now, as the market starts to trade, we can start to get an idea of what we need to have on our screens on the intraday. Now, the first thing that I like to do is I like to try to find where is my pre-market low and where is my pre-market high. These come into play very, very often. For the pre-market high, we don't need a new line because the pre-market high was already at that 39.60 level. So that is already done. We already have our pre-market high mapped out. This was a previous level of support that has turned into a rejection. Now, if we go and look at the pre-market low, I would say it is right around this 39.40 level. You can see that we had a previous support here. This is from the after hours on last week. We had a support right here in the pre-market, and we had a support right here in the pre-market as well, around this 39.40 level. So I had that mapped out as we started to trade intraday. I have my 39.40 mapped out. Now, what you guys are going to see here on the 5-minute chart is after we dived to the downside early morning, came back down to the last week's lows, made new lows, but ultimately found support here. Look at where we pushed into. We pushed right back into the previous pre-market lows. Right here is where I took my SPX puts. I will pop them up on the screen for you to see. I did take them very light, but I was testing out this pre-market rejection point. I saw the market popping back to the upside, and I saw it coming back into those pre-market lows, a level that has to be on your screen. Now, I was trading the SPX puts with the idea of the market rejecting the pre-market lows, turning them into a resistance, and coming back down into that previous week low around that 3,900 level. You can see we rejected this multiple times, put multiple wicks at this pre-market low, and we turned it into a very nice rejection point, trading back down into the last week's lows around this 3,900. So now I want to really break this down to the 1-minute chart and really focus on that intraday analysis and start to spot where are these levels forming on the intraday and how are they showing importance. So you guys can see this is the 1-minute chart. We have that rejection up here at the pre-market lows. We have that general support down here at last week's lows, right around this 3,900 to 3,903 level. We have that range that was built today between the pre-market highs or pre-market lows and the lows of last week. On the intraday, inside this channel, there are still some takeaways that definitely showed today. The first one that definitely showed intraday, if we go ahead and zoom in here and just look at what happened sort of in the morning, the first level that shows in my head is around this 39.20 level. You guys can see we had a rejection here early morning. We pushed to the downside, we came back up. 39.20 was a clear rejection point. So if we are just looking at the morning, if we ignore what happened after the fact, we're looking at 39.20 because this was a pivot point, this was a push to the upside, and a rejection level. So I know that if we come back into that 39.20, I need to be watching that for another rejection. Now we can sort of move this chart over. We pushed back into the 39.20. We rejected it a few times, and ultimately we did break this level. You can see that support was actually starting to build around this 39.20. We started to turn this previous rejection into support, and this was a nice little takeaway for that upside move. If we move this line over, I'm going to actually put it on the top side of this. If we move this line over, and we keep on moving over, what's the next level that we can see, or what's the next time that we can see this 39.20 was tested? We came to the upside, we rejected the 39.40. The market traded back down to this previous rejection point, and it found support right here at 39.20. So this 39.20 started to really show significance. If this level wasn't on your screen yet, then it should be now. After seeing a previous rejection that turned into a support, that level has to be on your intraday analysis. If we continue to move over, we can see rejection stayed in here at 39.40, and we can see that right here, we tried to hold the 39.20 once, and we sort of bear flagged, and there was your downside move. There was your flush under 39.20. So this was a very pivotal point of today. You can see we had a push to the upside and a pivot to the downside. This was a pivotal part of today's price action where we broke that 39.20. Now, if we continue to move this over, here is something that's going to be very interesting. Look at the price action as we started to trade later in the day. We just could not get back above the 39.20 level. Look at the importance of this level. We pushed back into it. We rejected it. So we have to make sure we are aware of these intraday analysis levels. You can see 39.20. We continue to move over. We continue to go towards close. We can see once again, push to the upside. What happened once again? A push into 39.20 and another rejection. So a very key level here at 39.20 that continued to reject. We tried to push into it again at close right here, about an hour before close. We pushed into 39.20, and again, we have another rejection. So you can see the fact that I was able to spot, or you were able to spot, this 39.20 level early morning here today, around 10 o'clock this morning. We saw a previous rejection. We saw the little battle here we had that ultimately broke up. We had a pullback support. We had a push back to the upside. We broke it. After breaking it, we rejected it. We rejected it. We rejected it. This is an important thing to be having on your screen, because what you could sort of make in your head or as you start to trade is, okay, I see upside coming in, but do I trust this upside? I see the upside off demand, maybe at this last week's lows, but do I want to long it into this potential rejection at 39.20? Now, someone that does not have 39.20 on their screen, right? If you're just blind to the fact that that 39.20 level is there, they might try to long it here. They might try to long it here. They might take calls here, and they lose every single time on it because they are not doing their intraday analysis. They are not focusing on the key level of importance that was built on the intraday levels. You can see right here, 39.20 was showing very, very large importance on the intraday basis. Rejection, 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 support, rejection, and rejection. So I know this is all in hindsight. I know it's not the best to be showing this in hindsight, but the importance of today's video is to share with you that you have to be looking for intraday levels of importance. This level was very clear today. It was spot on. Us in the group, we were calling it out all day. We were trading it off 39.20. We were taking puts off 39.20. Every time we came into 39.20, it showed rejections. If you're not aware of these levels on the intraday, you're not really being very strict with your levels. You're not having any type of guidelines in your trading. If the market's below 39.20, rejections are possible. If we are above it, possible support, right? If we broke above 39.20 and we turned it into support, that would be our long entry. So knowing where that intraday level is, there always seems to be that one level on an intraday basis to be focusing on, and today was 39.20. So I hope this video helps a little bit. I know it's all after the fact. I know it's not a perfect example of a live sort of analysis on the intraday basis, but I want to get across the importance here, how I find my levels, how I focus on these intraday levels to make trades off of. Today, it was that pre-market low rejection. It was last week's lows as support, and it was that intraday 39.20 to be focusing on and trading off of all day. The levels were very, very clean today, and having these levels will help you make trades on an intraday basis that are structured and based off real technical levels. So guys, I hope you did enjoy today's video. If you have any questions, make sure to drop them down below. Make sure to press that like button, subscribe to the channel, and I hope to see you guys in the next one. Peace.